And good afternoon, everyone. You've tuned in to TV Courtroom, hosted by yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. And by the way, let me just explain what I mean by the angriest black man in America. James Baldwin made an excellent point when he said that. In fact, he said it in a slightly different way, but the gist of what he was saying was to be black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. That doesn't mean a destructive rage, a negative rage. It means a productive rage. It means a constructive rage to do what I did. In fact, go to school, get a great education, bring it back to the hood, and make things better for black people, make things better for people of color, make things better for poor people. Because black people, poor people, and people of color have been exploited in this land, and something ought to be done. But before you can do something, you have to be motivated. Anger is a great motivation if you know the history of America. So when I call myself the angriest black man in America, it's in that context. Big shout out again to James Baldwin. Today's discussion is all about the election coming up on Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. And let me just say this at the very beginning. I am going to give my endorsements. I'm going to give my personal endorsements. I'm going to give my personal endorsements based on my personal opinion. So when I start to name the candidates that I'm endorsing, this is not necessarily the position of Philly Cam. It's not necessarily the position of the Philadelphia Tribune. It's not necessarily the position of WURD 96.1 FM. It's not necessarily the position of Temple University. All those entities I have a connection with, but I don't speak for those entities. So when I give you my endorsements, understand that it's mine and mine alone. Some of them might agree with some of what I say, most of what I say, or none of what I say. It doesn't matter. I'm just giving you one angry black man's position, opinion, endorsement regarding the upcoming election. But I'm not going to name the candidates I'm endorsing until after I finish interviewing my invited guest who will be with us within about 10 minutes or so. And the reason why I'm not going to talk about my endorsements until after my guest is I wanted to be clear that my guest is objective. My guest is impartial. My guest is an elected public servant. So he does not necessarily agree with what I say or necessarily disagrees. Whatever he wants to do on his own is fine. Whatever I want to do on my own. But I just want you to know that in connection with my personal endorsements, it's no reflection regarding his position. Uh, Let me do this so you know exactly what I'm talking about. I put out on social media today information about today's TV courtroom show. And let me just read it to you. At the top, it has the scales of justice, as if you're in court. We are kind of, sort of. This is TV courtroom. Next to that, it has the colors red, black, and green. Those are the symbols of liberation for black people. And then there's a black fist, basically a black power symbol. And then there's an exclamation point in red after that. And right next to that, it reads TV courtroom. And directly beneath that, it reads as follows: join a Philly Cam audience base of over 350,000 local households by tuning in to TV Courtroom, hosted by attorney Michael X. Topics today: one, election endorsements, attorney Michael X. That's me. Number two, election rules, City Commissioner Omar Sabir. So, just so people don't get confused, City Commissioner Omar Sabir will not be giving any endorsements. City Commissioner Omar Sabir does not necessarily agree or disagree or take any position about what I do, but I want to keep these two issues completely separated. That's why I'm not going to give you the list of my endorsements until after I finish my interview with City Commissioner Omar Sabir. let me go back to the social media post. In addition to stating what I already said, it has an image of the TV courtroom with the scales of justice. Beneath that, it has a similar image on the left side and the right side. In the middle, it's me, yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. Friday, November 4, 2022. I got to tell you, we got the best, and I do mean the best producer in the business. While I'm sharing this with you, to make it easier for you, our producer Roland has it right up there on the screen. So not only can you hear me talk about it, you can even better read it for yourself. Friday, November 4, 2022, 3:30 p.m. Xfinity channels 66, 966. Files channels 2930, on demand, phillycam.org, and Facebook live stream. Big shout out to our producer extraordinaire, Roland, for posting that. We got to pay him a little more. He does a great job here. So, we're going to talk about exactly why the upcoming election is so important. And again, I'm not going to make any endorsements about any candidates until after our guest joins us within the next few minutes. But let me suggest to you all that you take a look at two columns I wrote in the Philadelphia Tribune. I wrote one which was posted in the Philadelphia Tribune on October 16. I just wrote another one which will be in this Sunday's Tribune, but it'll be online tomorrow morning. And as you see in the image, to my left, phillytrib.com. You can read the full article. And the one from October 16, that's the early endorsement because right around that time, people had received their ballots and they were able to either mail them, complete them first, obviously, mail them in, or complete them and then drop them off. This coming November 8 election is so important that I did something I've never done before. I always put out my endorsement list the weekend before the Tuesday election, if it's the May primary or the November general. And I do it the weekend before that Tuesday. But this coming 2022 election is so important. I decided to do it twice. I did it October 16 so that people who were filling out their ballots and mailing them in or filling out their ballots and dropping them off, they would have the necessary information. And then I did it again. In fact, I finished writing it today. It'll be in the Sunday, this coming Sunday Tribune hard copy, but it'll be available online as soon as tomorrow. So, as our producer indicated, just go to phillytrib.com. That's for my newspaper, the Philadelphia Tribune, and simply type in CORD, COARD, type in endorsements, and you will see the October 16 early endorsement, and you'll see this weekend's current endorsement. And the reason why I did it twice, it's pretty much explained in a number of columns. Well, in fact, the two columns I wrote, one October 16 and then the other today. And let me just read to you what I wrote in terms of, and I'm not endorsing anybody yet. I'll get to that after our guest comes on. Um, Here's what I wrote. This is verbatim. Be afraid. Be very afraid. And then vote. The November 8, 2022 general election will determine if America will remain a multicultural, secular democracy or become a racist, religious autocracy. That is no hyperbole. I was feeling that when I wrote it, and I'm still feeling it, so I got to repeat it to you. Quote, the November 8, 2022 general election will determine if America will remain a multicultural secular democracy or become a racist, religious autocracy. That is no hyperbole. Then the article goes on to read as follows. America is at a political crossroads, unlike any time in its history since passage of the 13th Amendment, slavery abolition, 14th Amendment, black citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, black male voting. These were all Reconstruction amendments from 1865 and 1868 and 1870. And when I make that bold statement that this upcoming election is the most important since those days, I mean that. That's why I go on to write, quote, that is no exaggeration. I'm not going to read the other part because right now, I'll read it later, but I'm not going to read the other part right now because it begins to go into my endorsements. And again, I don't want people to get confused to think that my guest has anything to do with my endorsements. I want to keep my guest as impartial as he is, as objective as he is, because he's a taxpayer funded public servant. So he has to do the right thing, and he always does the right thing. Let me say this, which is really important in terms of why people should vote, especially why people from oppressed classes ought to vote. And, I used to say, up until I really got into American history, I used to say that Black people have always had it worse than any other people here in America. And there's obviously a lot of truth to that. But you have to look at what happened to the red people. And here I am, a Black man. I've spent my entire adult life fighting for Black rights, being pro Black. But the more I research and delve into what happened to our red brothers and our red sisters, that was some hell. That was just horrific because those people, our red brothers and sisters, had their land invaded upon, but it didn't stop there. They were beaten, they were raped, they were murdered. It was wholesale genocide. But it wasn't just genocide of the people, it was their land, their name, their culture, their spirituality, just wiped off the map. I mean, we walk around here in Pennsylvania. We walk around New Jersey. We walk around Georgia and Mississippi and Texas and Arizona. We walk around this whole place we call America. This was somebody else's land. White Americans beginning in the 1600s just came here and took all their stuff and wiped them off the map and forced them to cut their hair and forced them to speak a foreign language and forced them to worship a new god. So it wasn't just a physical genocide where you kill people, it was a wholesale cultural obliteration. So when we talk about people voting, we're talking about red people. We're talking about Black people. We're talking about brown people. And we're also talking about our yellow brothers and sisters in the Asian community because they were actually placed in concentration camps here in America. So everybody has a horrific story to tell. Clearly, the red people got the biggest and the worst. Right behind them are Black people. Behind them are brown people who had their land taken away. We talk about how Mexicans are illegal aliens. That's just a horrific term, illegal aliens. First of all, no human being is illegal. And how can you be alien to your own land? You know that most of Southwest America, Texas and Arizona and all those places, that belonged to Mexico. America took it from Mexico. So let's imagine that you live at 123 Main Street and I live at 125 Main Street. I live right next door to you. But I decide from 125 Main Street to come in and take half of 123 Main Street, half of your house. Split it right down the middle. So I keep mine, take half of yours. And then when you, who have your half, decide that you don't have enough resources, so you want to come back to the other half of yours, which is now mine because I took yours. And then I call you an illegal alien. And I kick you out of my country, which was really your country until I used guns and cannons and soldiers and took all your stuff. So the more you know about American history, the more outrage you'll be. And that's why, going back to James Baldwin, I'm the angriest black man in America. And I think any person of color who knows the history of what America has done to him or her or them is going to be angry. But I got to be clear, it's got to be anger in a productive kind of way. If it's not productive, then it doesn't count. Those of you who are very, very interested in this, you got to read the articles that I wrote in the Philadelphia Tribune because it goes into much more detail than we'll have time to get into here on the TV courtroom. And what we're going to be doing very soon is to bring our guest in, and our guest will be bringing to us some important information. And we look forward to having him within the next few minutes. But I want to make sure that we get into everything that we need to get into in connection with today's show because it's a whole bunch. It's a whole bunch of information that's critical to your betterment in society. And when I say your betterment in society, I'm talking about you as a person of color, a red person, a black person, a brown person, a yellow person. You got reasons to seek change in this country. If you are a woman or a girl, you gotta and you want to seek change in this country. If you are gay or lesbian or transgender, or if you are Muslim, if you are disabled, if you are anything that's not a straight white male with money in America, then you got trouble because there are white folks who are struggling and they're victims of classism, victims of capitalism, and they too need to struggle. So it seems to me that when there's a call for change, that call for change should be coming from everybody who's not a straight white male with money. If you're a straight white male with money and you're a Christian, straight white male Christian with money, then pretty much your people took over and now dominate this country. So you don't really have much to complain about. But if you're in some other group, then you got a lot to legitimately complain about. One of the things I want to make sure we do at this point is to get to our guest. Time now is 3:48, and we know he's very busy, especially around now because you're only a few days away from the upcoming November 8 election. So without further ado, my good friend, and if you knew him, he'd be your good friend as well, City Commissioner Omar Sabir. Let me just spend a few seconds telling you about this gentleman before we bring him up on the screen. Anytime I talk about him, I always have to talk about Cheney University because people like him, people like me, and many of us, we know that we are where we are and we have what we have because of the great education provided to us by historic Cheney University. Also, I describe him as a great family man. He's a father who always does the right thing as a provider for his family. In addition, Omar Sabir is a great public servant. When I say great public servant, I mean that he doesn't come in at 9 o'clock Monday through Friday and leave at 5 o'clock Monday through Friday. He probably sleeps in the office. He's always doing city commissioner related work. He's a guest on my radio show on the weekends when he should be getting some rest. But for him, rest comes later. He always needs to do his job and, in fact, always does his job. So at this point, we're going to bring up City Commissioner Omar Sabir. We're going to talk to him about the great work that he's doing. And without further ado, City Commissioner Omar Sabir, how are you today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. This weather is beautiful. Our 8-0 Eagles just annihilated the Houston Texans. So we're here and we have an important election coming up. And I'm just so excited. The weather forecast seems like it's going to be great this whole weekend. And all the way up to like Tuesday, Wednesday, no precipitation.
I love it.
Sunshine. So, I'm ready for it.
In fact, you and your staff are quite ready for it from your office, Samaya Bynum, really thorough. Make sure
Oh,
that we
Samaya,
got
yeah,
you
she's doing a great job. Yeah.
make sure we got you on time, provided all the information. So, I give you all the credit for doing work, but I didn't meet your staff. The staff was probably doing much of the work. You're just the front man for all that. But in all seriousness, let's start from the very beginning. You've been for the last year or so a guest on my radio courtroom show on WURD 96.1 FM. And we always start with a couple things. One, and let's start that way today. What is a city commissioner and what does a city commissioner do?
The city commissioners are a three-member bipartisan board of elected officials, and we oversee the election functions in Philadelphia County. So that includes everything related with elections. That's making sure the poll workers are there to set up the votes. That's the canvas. That's the pre-canvas. And we also maintain the voter registration rules. And the commissioners have been around for quite some time. We actually been around since 1711.
Whoa.
And yeah,
Okay.
so we definitely got some long and the way and the current form of our role emerged in 1951 with the adoption of Philadelphia's Home Rule Charter. So we've been around for a very long time, and I want to let citizens know that we're here for you, and that our elections have always been safe, simple, and secure. Free elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. Now, there always have been like a question of who was allowed to vote, who wasn't allowed to vote, and that question still remains to this day. But just the actual system of elections, I mean, it's good. And can it be better? Yes, but in the meantime, we have abundance of evidence that proves that our elections are safe, sober, and secure. And I want everyone to know that when they cast their vote, they are heard.
I love having you as a guest because even though you're a big time, highfalutin city official, you do what Brother Malcolm says. You make it plain. You let the folks know on the street, college education or GED or dropout, they all understand how the system works. Let's walk people through the process. I know that there were some deadlines that have since passed, but just start from the beginning. Tell us what the first deadline was and bring us up to today.
Okay, so the first deadline was on October the 24th. That was the voter registration deadline. You have to be a registered voter in order to participate in elections, and that already passed. November the 1st was the deadline for you to apply for your universal vote by mail ballot. Now, the deadline that we have coming up upon us is Tuesday, November the 8th at 8 p.m. That's the deadline for you to deliver your completed vote by mail ballot. And if you have a vote by mail ballot, please make sure that you sign, make sure that you date it, and make sure that you bring it into one of our 18 Eagles Green drop off locations that are located across the city of Philadelphia. Please do not put it in the mail because I have to have your completed vote by mail form, vote by mail ballot in my hand by Tuesday, 8 p.m. We don't accept any postmarks. So we need it directly inside of our hand. And if you have lost your ballot, you can come to City Hall room 140 and you can get what's known as a replacement ballot. So again, all the information I just said is on PhiladelphiaVotes.com, PhiladelphiaVotes.com. You can get all the latest information that you need. And the polls on Tuesday, November the 8th, they open up at 7 a.m. and they close at 8 p.m. So we're calling on all Philadelphians to step up to vote. We're calling on all Philadelphians that their voice be heard. Once you get inside line, if you get inside line before 8 p.m., no matter what time it is, by law, you are allowed to vote. If your name is not inside the voting rolls, don't get frustrated. You always can vote provisionally in any division across the county, and your vote will be counted. People want to talk negative about provisional ballots, but a provisional ballot is the same as you voting on a machine. It's the same as you voting by mail. Your vote will be counted as long as you are a registered voter in the county of Philadelphia.
as you always do a great job letting us know where people can get information. You provided that website. Give us the phone number. And after you give us the phone number, I have two questions for you. One, what did the Pennsylvania Supreme Court recently rule in connection with voting? And number two, what do you say to people who say, oh man, I got a criminal record, I can't vote? So, first, give us that phone number, then tell us about the Supreme Court and about people with criminal records.
Sure. The phone number is 215-686-3462. 215-686-3462. The Supreme Court recently just ruled that they not count undated ballot. And what's an undated ballot? It's real simple. In your declaration envelope, you're supposed to sign your name, and then you're supposed to put the date. And this rule has been changing back and forth, literally almost every election. It's a very heated, partisan sort of debate. And you are supposed to sign and date it, but it's the debate of whether or not you not putting the date there or making a clerical error where it wouldn't invalidate your vote. And so that's what's at hand. So right now the pendulum has swung back to is your vote not being counted. But again,
Just so we're
right,
clear,
right.
are they putting those ballots on hold, or are they completely voiding them?
So they're segregated, right? And they're saying not to count them. So this is where we're at this second. Now, if
Okay.
someone wants to file a lawsuit, which I believe the lawsuit may come,
Hmm.
they're going to say, hey, we want them to be counted. And
Okay.
it's the back and forth, and it's going to go back to the courts. That's why every election is very important. It's important who's at Commonwealth Court. It's important who's in the state Supreme Court. I mean, all of this stuff matters. That's why we can't take any elections off. And judges in Pennsylvania are elected, and they are ruling on some very crucial um, instances that are happening. So right now, as it stands, if you hear my voice, you can sign it, and we want you to date it. If you're hearing this message and you already mailed your ballot, you still have time to come into City Hall and you can cure your ballot. So if you say you made a mistake, or I didn't put my date on there, it's no problem. Come to City Hall, room 140. You can get a replacement ballot, and we can assure you that you can fix whatever mistake that you may have made. So we're here. We're open for you. And if you have a criminal background, you can vote. In Philadelphia, there's approximately between 300 to 400,000 uh, individuals who have criminal backgrounds. And for decades, they've been told they've been targets of disinformation. And they have been told that they cannot vote and not participate in the election process, which is far from the truth. Once you leave your confinement, you are eligible to vote if you have been convicted of a felony. And if you're on house arrest, if you're on probation, you can still get registered. You can still vote. Even if you are confined, if you're walking down the street, and let's just say you're hearing this right now and you're free and you get arrested, you can apply for an emergency ballot, and we'll have a designated agent come from the prisons. They'll come down, they'll get the ballot, and then they'll transport the ballot for you. But you will be eligible to vote. Even if you're charged with a felony, you're still going to be able. The problem is if you're currently confined and you're convicted with a felony, that's the only time that you're not eligible to vote in the state of Pennsylvania. Any other ways you can vote. If you're sick and you're not going to be able to make it Tuesday election day, you can get an emergency ballot. If you have to leave suddenly, if you have a job and your job says, hey, you have to, go out of town and you're going to be gone for election day, you can apply for an emergency absentee ballot.
Excellent. We appreciate you breaking down the way that you do. And those who just tuned in, you're listening to and viewing City Commissioner Omar Sabir letting us know about the rules of voting in Philadelphia. I always ask you this, Mr. Commissioner, on my radio show, but I want to ask you to this new audience, up to 350,000 persons checking us out. What do you say to people who are legitimately frustrated? They're like, oh, we don't get our trash picked up, and I don't like the person who was elected to city council. I hate the mayor. I despise the governor. I don't like the president. And every election is these same people, and nothing changes. I'm not voting. What do you say, Mr. Commissioner?
I say those are the symptoms of you not voting. If you're getting your trash picked up on time, if you have potholes coming up, you probably from an area that doesn't vote at a high rate.
Great
You
point.
know, the more you
Explain that
vote,
because you do a great
right,
job breaking that down. Explain what
sure,
you mean
sure.
by that.
Oh, listen. Well, the more you vote, the more you get, and policy decisions are based off of ballot behavior. And so, if you don't participate in elections, you're not going to get the best services. You're not going to get the best accountability if you don't vote. And so, every time you vote, it's larger the candidates. Every time you step in that booth and you're voting for your neighborhood. You're voting for resources. You're saying, hello, I care about my community, and my community deserves all the resources, all the accountability that it is entitled to because everyone is taxpaying citizens, but not everyone is voters. And elected officials, policymakers, if you don't vote, they're going to prioritize the people that vote, and it's a shame, but that's democracy, and the majority typically rules. And I just had a conversation with the highest voting area in Philadelphia, and
Mhm.
it's Chestnut Hill, and it's
Wow.
parts of Center City.
Okay.
And most of those people are doing well. They're making
Mm.
six figures. They don't really
Yes.
need LIHEAP.
Yes.
They don't need
Yes. Yes.
Section 8. They don't need,
Great point. Great point.
for help. And then I said, well, why do y'all vote so much? They said, because I might be in a problem or a jam one day, and I may need to call my council person up, and I want them
Wow.
to answer the phone when I call them. That's the reason why we vote. I might want a pothole fixed. I might want quality of life issues. I might have raccoons. I might have anything. I may need them.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's the reason why we vote the way we vote.
I'm so glad you explained it like that because that's the perfect response. And we know that people do have legitimate grievances, but you're saying you got to get in the game and play. You can't complain unless you're in the game. And getting in
Hey,
the game
well, we
means,
already tried. So we already tried not voting
mm,
and seeing where it was at. And if you systematically sort of look at our voter turnouts in Philadelphia, at a point in time, it was going down low. I mean, it got to a long time low of about 9% 2013. Thank God, our numbers are going back up the other way. We working on grassroots organizations and
mhm, mhm.
nonpartisan civic participation, but it was a point in time where 2013 we had a 9% voter turnout, and then in 2014, what happened? Governor Tom Corbett had cut $1 billion out of the education fund, and it was an election year. He went on ahead and cut $1 billion out. And Philadelphia has 1 million voters,
Mm,
and only at 9%. Oh no, he probably weighed everything up and said, you know
great
what?
point.
That was it. So again, there's consequences for not voting. Every time you don't vote, it's a vote for someone else or some other policy that's probably not favorable to you. So we're asking everyone to vote. Again, I'm not telling you who to vote for.
Mm.
Every time you vote, you're voting for your community, you're voting for your family members, and you're voting for the overall betterment of your community.
I'm glad you mentioned that in passing, that you're not telling people who to vote for. You're not endorsing anybody. You are impartial. You are objective. I can do my yelling and screaming before you come on. I can do my yelling and screaming after you go off. But while we have you on, we're going to respect you and your office. Speaking of respect for you and your office, tell the listening audience who might be worried about violence and threats against voters. I know here in Philadelphia, we have the DA, Larry Krasner, who actually had to prosecute some out of towners who came here with guns. I know you, as a city commissioner, you probably felt the wrath. What do you say to people who are afraid to vote because they think something bad's going to happen to them?
Our elections are safe, simple, and secure. We have an unprecedented partnership with local, state, and federal agencies to ensure that everyone's vote will be safe. If you want to become a poll worker, you will be safe. And if you want to help and process and help with the ballot counting, everything will be safe. Again, Philadelphia was the birthplace of democracy in America. And I'll be damned if democracy dies here in Philadelphia on my watch.
Very, very well said. You also mentioned poll workers. Talk about what they do. And even though you're modest, even though you're humble, you and a few others were instrumental in providing much more in terms of pay. But let's talk about first, what is a poll worker? what does a poll worker do, and how they about to get rich?
Sure. So we have our judge of elections, inspectors of elections, clerks, machine operator. They are the average everyday citizens who set up elections, who set up the machines. They get there early at 7 a.m. They open the polls and close them at 8 p.m. I always mention that the polls open up, but they wouldn't open up if it wasn't for a little under 10,000 Philadelphians who do it. The average age of a poll worker is 60 years old, and we're calling on younger residents to become poll workers, and we need you. We increased the pay $250. It's the first major pay increase that we had since Mayor
Let me
Tate was
stop you
in
right there. Let
office.
me you say that like it's no big deal. Some people don't make 250 in a week, in an entire week. Please continue.
Then you get $250. It's a long day. You have to be at the polls. You have to be there at 6 o'clock to set everything up. And you may not leave until 8:30, 9 o'clock. But again, we need you. You are basically the ones that administer the elections. I mean, I oversee the elections, my commissioners and I, but you are the ones that actually administer the elections. So we need you. You need to step up. And now is our time, and our time is now. And if anyone's interested, please go to pollworker.philadelphiavotes.com, pollworker.philadelphiavotes.com to apply, or you always can call in at 215-685-4811, 215-685-4811.
We really, really appreciate you. And those just tuned in, when I say you, I'm talking about City Commissioner Omar Sabir. We told him, we actually fooled him. We told him this would be about 10 minutes, but we knew all along we were going to keep him for about 30 minutes. We know he's very busy, especially about this time.
I might got about 4 or 5 in me. I'm guest hosting for the Laborers Live show on WURD. So we
I'm not
got Kyle.
surprised.
Right, so we got Kyle Anderson. He's on there filling in for me, but I definitely have to.
And I
About
know
2 or
that.
3
So
minutes.
you mentioned 4 or 5 minutes. We're only going to take 1 or 2, and those 1 or 2 go to you. And the final 1 or 2 minutes, what do you want to share with the viewing audience? The microphone and the camera are yours for the final 2 minutes.
Listen, Philadelphia, we want you to know that you have power. People have sacrificed for our right to vote. Now is our time, and our time is now to execute. We need you to participate in this upcoming election. We have a week, and I want you to spread the word. Let everyone know that we have drop boxes. If you have a ballot and we mailed it to you, please don't put it in the mail. Use one of our 18 Eagles Green drop off locations. If you want to find out where your polling locations are, go to philadelphiavotes.com. All the information is there. We have a cool feature where you can type your name in, type your address in, and to tell you where your polling locations are. Or you always can call our office at 215-686-3462, 215-686-3462. Remember, the more we vote, the more we get. Now is our time, and our time is now. Thank you.
Very, very well said, but more important, Mr. Commissioner, very well done. Please go and put out the other 50 fires you got to put out today, because I know your
Thank
day
you.
has just begun. City
Thank you.
Commissioner Omar Sabir, thank you very much, sir.
Sure.
That was
Thank
some
you.
great information from a great man who's doing great work. He posted, or I should say, he stated, and we posted a number of phone numbers and websites. I'm going to repeat a couple of those. First thing is this: if you have any questions about anything you heard today, call the Philadelphia City Commissioners at 215 686 3462. That's 215 686 3462. And if you want to check out everything on the website 24/7, just go to philadelphiavotes.com. That's philadelphiavotes.com. That was some great information from a great man who does great work. And I'm glad we're able to do it the way we did it, because I started off for the first 12, 15 minutes just talking about voting and its importance in a general kind of way. I alluded to my endorsements, but I didn't want to specifically go to them because I didn't want anybody to think that a city commissioner was a part of Michael Cord's endorsement. No, Michael Cord is partial. Michael Cord does lean toward one side as opposed to the other. And I'm going to share with you my endorsements, but I didn't want to do that before City Commissioner Sabir was on. I certainly didn't want to do it while he was on. So I'm getting ready to get into it. There's a lot wrong with America. There's a lot wrong with Pennsylvania. there's a lot wrong with Philadelphia. And how do you change a wrong? Well, Brother Malcolm has the answer. You see, he's right over my left shoulder. He said the ballot or the bullet. It's the only way you make change. The ballot or the bullet. You use violence and force and make a change, or you use the system to change the system. Nobody's calling for violence. Nobody who's reasonable, nobody's calling for shooting. Nobody's calling for killing. Nobody's calling for assaulting. At least nobody on our side of the political spectrum, the left side of the political spectrum. The right side is something different. And that's proven by what happened on January 6th. But let's put that to the side. So if Malcolm is saying that the only way you bring about change is through the ballot or the bullet, we agree that we're not talking about the bullet. So what's our only option remaining? It's the ballot. We have to use the system non-violently to change the system non-violently. Even though black people, red people, women people, disabled people, red people, brown people, poor people, and gay people, lesbian people, transgender people, each group of people that I mentioned and others are victims of a war imposed by the American system, the white, male, Christian, warmongering system. And during this war, we, the oppressed groups, we got to fight back. But the only way you fight back in a war is to know the rules of warfare. And the first rule of warfare is to do what your enemy doesn't want you to do. So if your enemy doesn't want you to attack by air, you send your Air Force. If your enemy doesn't want you to attack by sea, you send your Navy. If your enemy doesn't want you to attack by ground, you send your Army. You find out what your enemy doesn't want you to do, and whatever that thing is that your enemy doesn't want you to do, you do it. Well, in this case, for black people, for red people, for brown people, for yellow people, for women people, for gay people, for lesbian people, for transgendered people, for disabled people, for poor people, the enemy doesn't want you to vote. So even if you're not interested in voting, now that you know the first rule of warfare, which is to find out what your enemy doesn't want you to do, and then you do it, you vote. And when I say that the enemy doesn't want us to vote, let me just cite some statistics for you so you know that I'm not just pulling this out of my hat. There was a report issued on April 8, 2022, but by a group called, quote, States United Democracy Center. That's the name of the group, States United Democracy Center. And this group, the SUDC, the States United Democracy Center, here's what they discovered and publicized. Quote, Republican officials in 33 states are now considering 229 bills that would allow state legislatures to criminalize or interfere with elections. And a total of 50 bills have been enacted or adopted, 32 last year, 18 thus far this year. What does all that mean? There are 50 states in the United States. 33 of them have taken action in almost 250 bills to take away your right to vote. Think about that. This is not 1720 or 1820 or 1920. We're talking about 2022. So obviously, your enemy doesn't want you to vote. That's why you should. There's much more I want to tell you. So the first thing was why you should vote. Well, first rule of warfare is find out what your enemy doesn't want you to do, and you do it. That's why you should vote. And the second thing, if you're black, the second thing, if you're red, the second thing, if you're brown, not only were people often say, well, I'm voting because my ancestors died for my right to vote. That's not really true. My black ancestors didn't die for my right to vote. My black ancestors were murdered for my right to vote. Octavius Catto wasn't at home in his bed at age 93, had a heart attack, and died. No, he was a young man, 32 years old, in South Philly near 8th and South Street, shot and killed by a white man with 2 shots to the back because Octavius Catto was trying to organize black men to vote. He didn't die for my right to vote. He was murdered for my right to vote. You want to know more about Octavius Catto? Go down to the south side of City Hall. There's a gigantic statue in his honor, and it tells the story of this great man who, by the way, graduated from the school that became Cheney University, my alma mater, taught at that same school. When he was there, it was called the Institute for Colored Youth. Now it's known as Cheney University. Well, that's Octavius Catto. And that's the whole concept of voting rights. So, number two, why you should vote. Your ancestors didn't die for your right to vote, they were murdered for your right to vote. And when Octavius Catto was shot and killed by that white man in South Philly, I can't go back in time and save him. I can't go back in time and rescue him, but I can listen to his whispers. And I can hear him saying, Michael, vote, because that's what I was trying to do when these white people killed me. And I'm listening to him and I'm trying to spread his message to every other person. Hey, while Octavius Catto was dying, bleeding to death from 2 gunshots fired by a white man, as he's laying there dying in the gutters of South Philly, he's asking us, better stated, he's passing us the baton. He said, I was running with this baton to get black men and black women the right to vote. They just murdered me, these white folks. So I can't run around with this baton anymore to get black men and black women to vote. But this Octavius Catto talking, I can pass you the baton and you could run with it. And while you're running with it, you can pass it to other folks. That's what I'm doing now. So number two, as to why you should vote, your ancestors were murdered. Remember the 3 points I'm breaking down to you. Number one, the first rule of warfare is find out what your enemy doesn't want you to do, and then you do it. That's why you should vote, because your enemy doesn't want you to vote. Number two, your ancestors didn't die for your right to vote. Your ancestors were murdered for your right to vote. And the third reason, which is extremely important, do you know that the way that jurors are selected in large part is from voter rolls? So when the system is looking for people to be on the jury, the system goes through motor vehicle registration list. The system goes through voting list. And from those lists, they get people to be on juries. Now, you might not want to be on a jury because you say, oh, I don't have time for it, but you got to make time for it, because being a juror is the only time in America that a black person can stand up to the system and win. When you're a juror in a criminal case and you believe the cops did something wrong, you can stop that as a juror. If you're a black person and you're a juror and you believe that the police should pay in a civil lawsuit millions of dollars for killing somebody, you can make that happen. In other words, when you're a juror, you can change things. When you're a juror, you can stop things with your one voice, with your one vote as a juror. Now, we always talk about jurors and a unanimous verdict. It has to be 12-0. That's true. But one among those 12 can stop those 12s and force a mistrial to be declared. So the third reason to vote is that the more you vote, the greater chance that you can be a juror and you can make sure stuff like what happened in the Rodney King verdict, where the cops are beating the slap out of a black man, but the white jurors say, no harm, no foul. When you see a situation where cops kill people and it's on videotape, and with the exception of George Floyd, they get away scot-free. As a juror, you can stop that. As a juror, you can bring an end to that. Having said that, let me just read to you in our final 5-6 minutes what I wrote in the Tribune. And I want you to do two things. One, I want you to go to phillytrib.com and I want you to type in CORD, COARD, and I want you to type in endorsements. I actually wrote 3 articles in the past month. One was the early voting endorsement. The second one was 10 reasons why Black people should vote. And the third one was today. Now it's going to be in the hard copy of this coming Sunday Tribune. That would be November the 6th. But it's going to be online at the Philadelphia Tribune's website at phillytrib.com. And let me just read to you the pertinent portion of, I guess, a combination of all that I wrote. And it starts like this. It explains that the plight of oppressed people in America is at an all-time high. That's why when I started writing this article, I wrote the following. The November 8, 2022 general election will determine if America will remain a multicultural secular democracy or become a racist religious autocracy. That is no hyperbole. America is at a political crossroads unlike any time in its history since passage of the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, 14th Amendment, Black citizenship, and 15th Amendment, Black men voting. All these are Reconstruction amendments from 1865 and 1868 and 1870. And what I'm saying now in 2022, that we're pretty much there after those bills passed, I should say after those amendments passed, and the rights of Black people were taken away after that. There was something called the Redemption Era. All these amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th, were part of the Reconstruction amendments to reconstruct America and to make it what it was supposed to be. But shortly after the Reconstruction era, weeks, months, couple years, there was something called the Redemption Era. And the Redemption Era, the best way to describe it is this. If Reconstruction was one step forward from a racial perspective, Redemption was 2 steps back, where white folks in America were trying to use the law that benefited us in Reconstruction, trying to use the law against us, and were largely successful. You can see that happening now. We know that America is racist. We know that America is classist, but it's very rare that there's a law on the books that people have that's taken away. The battle is usually to fight to get the law on the books. And once you get the law on the books, you're pretty cool. But that's not what's happening now in modern America. We all know what happened in the Roe versus Wade situation, where people call it abortion rights. It's not abortion rights. People call it women's rights. It's not women's rights. You know what it is? It's human rights. The idea that the government can tell a human being who happens to be a woman what he or she or they can and cannot do with their body. Think about that. The government telling a woman what she can and cannot do with her body. And that's why I say it doesn't matter whether the person is a woman, because it's not about whether or not the person is a woman. It matters whether the person is a human that has autonomy over that person's own body. Well, we all know in a recent Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court said, yeah, we know Roe versus Wade said that, yeah, women have the right to choose and all that, but we're taking that away. That's America taking rights away. We're familiar with America not giving rights, but it's rare where they take it away. That just happened. What about 2016? We all know about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The U.S. Supreme Court in the Shelby County case, 2016. Google it. Google it. That's 2016. The Shelby case, Shelby. They pretty much took back the Voting Rights Act of 1965 by chopping its legs out on 2 important sections. So you got a woman's right to choose / abortion / human rights taken away in a recent decision where Roe versus Wade was overturned. You got the Shelby case by the Supreme Court, which took away the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We got to make sure, people, that we fight back, that we resist. I know the Democrats are not revolutionary. I know the Democrats are not even progressive to a large part, but at least the Democrats are not fascist. And when I say fascist, I literally mean fascism. If we want to break down the definition of fascism, we have to talk about basically four component parts. One, it's all about nationalism, make America great again. Number two, it's about racism. You had a president that embraced the Nazis and the Proud Boys. Number three, intolerance. Shut down the media, burn the books. Number four, which is extremely important and people need to appreciate it, what I call a quasi religious government, where it's not like a theocracy, but it is a situation where one religion dominates over all of them. What we have here in America, Christian nationalism. And then finally, number five, autocracy. We're not talking about the Republican Party anymore. We're talking about the Donald Trump Party. All that together, those five components, yep, you guessed it, fascism. Having said that, folks, when you go to vote on November 8th, vote for these persons. And this recommendation, this endorsement is not from Philly Cam. It's not from the Philadelphia Tribune, not from WRD, not from Temple University. It's simply the opinion and position of me, Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. Write this down, check it out in the Tribune. It goes like this. For U.S. Senate, John Fetterman. John Fetterman for U.S. Senate. For the U.S. House of Representatives, there are three of them. There's Brendan Boyle in District 2. That's Brendan Boyle, District 2. There's Dwight Evans in District 3. Dwight Evans, District 3. There's Mary Gay Scanlon, District 5. So the three for the U.S. House, Brendan Boyle, Dwight Evans, Mary Gay Scanlon. For governor, Josh Shapiro. Governor, Josh Shapiro. Lieutenant governor, Austin Davis. Lieutenant governor, Austin Davis. For city council here in Philadelphia, there are four. Quetzi Lozada, District 7. Anthony Phillips, District 9. Jimmy Harity, at large. Sharon Vaughn, at large. Once again, I'll repeat those four names. Quetzi Lozada, District 7. Anthony Phillips, District 9. Jimmy Harity, at large. Sharon Vaughn, at large. And then there are two ballot questions. Normally, I take a strong position for or against them. Like a couple years ago, there was a question about stop and frisk. And I was really pushing that. Yes, vote yes to stop and frisk. But the ballot questions we have in the upcoming election are not critical to any oppressed class. So for the first time that I've been doing endorsements for the past, 15, 20 years, I don't make a recommendation on the questions. Question number one, should the city of Philadelphia create a Department of Aviation distinct from the Department of Commerce? I'm saying not a big deal. It doesn't matter. Second question, should the city of Philadelphia have a preference for career tech program graduates and civil service jobs? Again, no big deal. I take no position. Finally, in our last 20 seconds, once again, vote for the following persons. U.S. Senate, John Fetterman. U.S. House, Brendan Boyle, Dwight Evans, Mary Gay Scanlon. Governor, Josh Shapiro. Lieutenant Governor, Austin Davis. City Council, Quetzi Lozada, Anthony Phillips, Jimmy Harity, and Sharon Vaughn. For more information, folks, check out my Philadelphia Tribune article. Check me out on Saturdays, WURD 96.1 FM, every Saturday from 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock. Check that out, and phillytrib.com. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend, and please be safe.